Hey, it's Matt Stephenson once again, and now we are with Jack Daniel. Title is Just Jack. You should already know him and know what he does. Jack, we've been talking about some interesting things. I asked a stupid question of you, like, what's keeping you awake and what helps you sleep? And you came back with something I thought that was very interesting about where we are right now in the ephemeral nature of InfoSec. So give me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the challenge is we've got to fix today's problems. So all of my knowledge for Windows NT4, for example, is of limited value today. It was critically important for me to study those things, figure out how to secure IIS4 and NT4 and those sort of things, Exchange 5, Exchange 555. That's not completely useless, but the details are useless. But while we focus on those things that we have to do daily, we're not really looking to solve big picture problems. And if we bring that forward, we do all of this ephemeral work, some people are working long term, we bring that forward, you've got to make sure that you've got mitigations in place for whatever the news story is. WannaCry is the most recent big one, and the various things. And you pay attention to the news and you have to make sure that you're patched or mitigated or defended in some way. But all of that takes our eyes off the ball of actually solving long-term problems. We have some foundational problems that have come from the ubiquitous nature of computing. Willis Ware warned us, or forewarned decades ago about what computers were going to do to us as far as changing our life. Everything we do is communicated through. People that don't own computers, that have landline phones, they communicate through computers, right? It's completely changed large parts of life. And we still have some of the fundamental problems. But meanwhile, if you don't address WannaCry or whatever the next big thing is, you're not doing your job. But you're trying to look forward, you're trying to stay on top of these things at once. And there are other people in other disciplines that are siloed, and we don't always take them seriously. So people in academia that are trying to solve big problems, if we don't work with them and understand where they're going and make them understand where we are, they're trying to solve a problem 8 years in the future, and they need to look 12 years in the future, and they've missed the target. If you solve a problem for Windows 14, and by the time it's in production we're on Windows 16, it doesn't, to make up things. But that sort of challenge, and we have real silos, and not just where government and military. A lot of people lump those together, never do that. The civilian sides of government have a different set of issues than the military sides. The intelligence communities, whether they're civilian or military, have different issues. They're kind of hyper-focused security issues in intelligence communities, not into the politics of it, but they have some real issues. We don't share information. Those of us that work in the vendor space, whether we've come from industry or where, we end up being siloed. People in industries end up being siloed, and we don't share information. It's really hard. A lot of us that are in this industry go to Black Hat, DEF CON, InfoSecurity Europe, go to BSides. We don't always talk to the people that are actually running companies and securing companies. We don't get to educational conferences. We don't get them, and that's one of the challenges, is tearing down those silos. And another thing that the larger the organizations that I work with, the more I see a stratification between technical people and tactical people, and then the management and executive layers. And it's a challenge. And one of the things that relates to, we take this history and this split between, I have to fix this today, I have to fix this today. That doesn't solve long-term problems. It ties back into something else I've done a lot of work in, which is coping with stress, burnout, continuous change. A lot of us come into security because we want a challenge. Right? We love challenges. We love working with brilliant people. We love working on problems.
When it used to be a challenge maybe once a week, things have gotten a little faster pace now.
Absolutely. It is a huge and continuous challenge. And it gets to be too much for folks. And it can be very frustrating, especially if you realize you're on that hamster wheel. You're running continuously. You're patching the machines you can patch. You're discovering things. Or if you're doing offensive security, you start to realize every time you get domain admin at the same company year after year, it's like, oh, they're not getting better. I'm just wasting, I'm on the hamster wheel as a pen tester or whatever. Or as a manager or technician, you don't have the resources you need. As an executive, you just don't want to be, you want to secure your environments. You don't want to be on the front page of the newspaper. But we have this stress of trying to work together. And we actually have a fairly high stress level in our industry, and it's crazy because people aren't shooting at us, right?
Well, and something that you mentioned before that has to add to the stress level, you're fighting, if you're in industry or in the commercial side of things, you're fighting battles against bad guys who have government-grade weaponry, and there should be the tools available to you, but they can be hard to reach. How do you deal with that without just absolutely pulling all of your hair out?
It's a matter of prioritization. There's a certain zen to accepting what you can't fix. And the challenge is to have enough knowledge of your environment, whatever reference you want to use, the OODA loop or whatever you want to focus on, having situational awareness, whatever you want to call it, knowing your environment well enough to understand, well, if this breaks, we're out of business. And a lot of people don't have that vision, especially if you're if you're an email administrator. If you think email goes away, you're out of business. But there are there's some organizations where email can go away for a week and nobody will notice. But if you take away whatever instant messaging tool they use, they're done.
I don't think anybody would really miss email, but take the text away and we're all out.
Right. Take away Slack or Skype or Zoom or whatever it is you communicate with. You got to understand that. For a lot of small businesses, and not always small businesses, their website can go away for a few days and come back. But if you do e-commerce, your website can't go away for a minute, right? And some companies, a website defacement's no big deal. Others, where you really are banking on your reputation, website defacement is a problem. So back to the attackers. When bad things start happening that are actively exploiting you, actively attacking you, not just automated bots and stuff, you don't know until you do some digging whether you're being attacked by hacktivists with a political bent, hacktivists with a social bent, whether it's a nation state, whether it's a competitor, whether it's organized crime and they're after money. You have to discover what they've done. And one of the challenges there is, there's a lot of argument about attribution, but this is, fraught with danger, and you don't want to call out somebody unless you really know. There's a challenge in that attribution is based on artifacts that your attacker leaves. So if you have a low-skill attacker, it's often very easy to figure out exactly who went after you. If you have a high-skilled attacker and you reverse engineer the malware and you're like, oh, it's Chinese because the language matches with what a native Chinese speaker speaking English would write. And then you say, but it's got a Cyrillic character set in the computer they use to compile the code. And it's like, oh, this is probably somebody that knows what they're doing. And there are false trails everywhere. And you have to kind of understand what the attack is. If it's a hacktivist, well, it's not a big deal. If it smells more advanced, maybe they're trying to steal money. Maybe they don't care about money. Intellectual property is more and more of a target. And people that have, thought they weren't a target, like higher ed, so many research institutions have so much intellectual property, and they're walking the tightrope between, intellectual freedom and protecting intellectual property. And it just adds to all these complexities, and if we don't talk to each other and understand each other's problems, we're not solving the problems. That's one of the challenges in vendor space. It's one of the things that I do is I talk to people a lot, customers and non-customers, and more importantly, I listen to them. And I think a lot of organizations in the vendor space would do better to actually listen to the people in the field and understand their problems. And those of us that defend environments should listen to the field. Not to get overly idealistic, but the one thing that I've realized we can do that helps with both short-term and long-term problems is build and expand our communities. I don't know who to turn to, then I'm alone. I know who to ask, I'm going to ask for help. Maybe I have a direct competitor. Maybe I'm in a small regional bank and we have a specific attack that's hitting us.
Wait, competitors, but that would be cooperation, not competition.
That'd be but there are places you can do this. And you've got to think about it. Maybe you can't give away intellectual property, but you can pick up the phone or send a text message and be like, I can't tell you much about this, but if you're seeing interesting traffic on TCP port whatever, you want to pay attention.
Hypothetically, if it hurts here.
If it hurts when I touch here, see a doctor or see an IDS analyst. And there are certs and ISACs and other things that sort of do this, and they do it in different degrees of skill. And a lot of them are government-based and depend on funding, and not to get into politics, but not everybody understands these challenges as well as others. So knowing who you can turn to, being 1 or 2 degrees of separation from the answer, even if it's not official, is beneficial, and it can help you find out who's attacking your little regional bank, and it can also have those conversations that can help the people coming out of university understand what they're facing, can help some of those university projects make tools that actually work. And we're starting to see some things that work well, but until we reach across the various silos, we're just going to keep chasing our tail, and I'm going to keep talking to people who are stressed and burnt out and leaving the industry. And I don't know if it's any worse than other high-stress professions, but first of all, we have low unemployment in our field, and we're generally well paid. And generally speaking, unless you're doing military forensics, people aren't shooting at you, right? We shouldn't be stressed out, right? We shouldn't be stressed out, but we are. And the main thing is there aren't enough people that are in the field doing it well. We can't be burning out anybody, whether you do it for the idealistic reasons of you should be good to people and we should take care of each other, or just because you can't afford to lose another employee. We need to take care of folks, and it all rolls together. The ability to move forward with some of these challenges is based on our ability to communicate. And sometimes it's as simple as telling vendors, "That's a really dumb feature. I've been asking you for this for 3 years. Why don't you do that?" Yeah. And sometimes it's the vendor saying, "Why don't you do it this way?" Because that's what the tool's built for. And sometimes it's going to a higher ed conference if you're in vendor space, or joining us at Info Security Europe or Black Hat or DEF CON or a BSides if you're in government or military. And you don't have to come in and wear your uniform and tell us you're at GCHQ or NSA. You can just come out and hang out, and we'll make friends, and we'll try to solve some problems and maybe have a pint or two, and off we go.
So, to the communication point, people, if they're looking for more information on what you're doing or what you're talking about or where you're going to be, where can they find you?
Jack_Daniel on Twitter. And if you ask the internet for the Shoulders of InfoSec, that's my history project. It's a wiki. There are a couple of ways to find me there. My blog is sad, and I'm very kind to my readers. I don't make them read much. But blog.uncommonsensesecurity.com. But
if we want to stand on the shoulders of giants, this is the man for it. Remember, it's Jack Daniel, no S, because it is a
name and a hobby too.
That's what we're talking about. I am at PacMatt73 on Twitter. We got all kinds of good stuff, so make sure to come back.